with breath work, it's almost like prescriptive in a way. Most people can breathe in certain patterns to elicit certain physiological responses. We're all a little different, but for the most part, there are certain principles that underlie the different breathing techniques. And so when you bring your breath down and you do slow breathing, let's say, for example, it calms your nervous system. It actually changes your brain chemistry, blood flow to your brain waves, all these cool things. And that allows you to do the mindset training in a more effective way.
But I've seen even books pop up and seminars and all these things like yoga for diabetes and breath work for blood sugars. So are there actually specific breathwork patterns that can help with low blood sugars or with high blood sugars? Or is it more meant to control the controllables like anxiety or frustration and not the blood sugars themselves?
In general, I would say the second option. You're controlling the controllables, which helps with blood sugar regulation. Mm-hmm. But there is evidence, right, that there are some specific principles of breathing that do reduce blood sugar spikes.
All right. Well, today I've got a special guest for us. We've actually got a connection through one of our other members, Gio. So thank you, Gio. But introduce us to Nick. And Nick Heath here has just an incredible background with not only living with type 1 diabetes, but also has done a lot of studies in the world of breath work, mindset, and as we were chatting a little bit through email, kind of life purpose and get into the real meanings of life. So really excited to jump in with you, Nick, and really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
So I'd love to kind of give everybody else some backstory through your eyes. So if you could give us maybe a little bit of your origin story, kind of how long have you had type 1, what brought you into the world of breath work, and a little bit about you.
Sure, yeah. So let's see, I got diagnosed when I was 11 and I'm 38 today. So yeah, I've had type 1 for quite a long time. And I really was just like a normal kid, you know. I kind of didn't take care of my blood sugars, lived a pretty normal life. My parents were amazing and like wanted me to just be a regular kid. And so I didn't pay much attention to my health until I was almost 24 or 25 when I was in graduate school. I started changing how I eat and exercising, and that kind of like opened my mind to this idea of I have some control over my health. I started eating differently. I started feeling so much better, having a lot of energy. And that kind of just opened me up to a lot of different perspectives and being open-minded to more holistic practices. And it wasn't until I was about 30 that I stumbled upon breathing and breath work. And it was specifically a person named Patrick McEwen. And he had a program called the Oxygen Advantage. And it just resonated with me. So I'm a scientist by training. So I'm a meteorologist. Actually, I study weather and air quality. So that's my day job. And I have a science mindset. I read papers all the time for work and things like that. And so when I started hearing someone talk about breathing from like a science perspective, I thought, oh my gosh, this is insane. All the oxygen, carbon dioxide, the nervous system connection, the connections to the brain. And so I just immediately started practicing it. I'm going to sit down and do this stuff. And it was about, well, I'll say like immediately I noticed like energy improvements and things, but it was a few months into it, I started to notice changes in my blood sugar and my stress levels, my sleep, all these different things. And I thought, what is going on? This is crazy. My A1C was really good. And I kind of felt a little like, this can't be real from just breathing. But as you all know, as type 1s, right, it's like I knew that was the only thing I changed, and I could just sense like this is definitely having an impact. So I started reading a bunch of papers and just like I wanted to understand it, and I found a bunch of science showing like effects on people with diabetes, but then also just the general physiological principles that made sense. Like, oh, okay, this does make some sense. Again, I'm not a pulmonologist or like a respiratory physiologist, but I felt like I could read a study and understand it, and so I just started sharing that. I just wanted to share it with people. I thought, okay, want people to understand you can use their breath to feel better, and not just like that, meditation, all these kind of I guess accompanying contemplative practices that go with it for both stress regulation and for blood sugar, helping with blood sugars, or at least helping with the ups and downs that come with diabetes. Yeah, so I've become sort of obsessed with all things breathing, mindfulness, meditation now, in addition to the breath work itself.
Wild. And it's something that's so often overlooked too, where it's like, we already do this, but why not do it intentionally? right? And it's certainly gaining popularity too. We look at a lot of people like Wim Hof or even Tony Robbins doing these breathwork exercises and recognizing the power behind it for altering state, where it's like if you're anxious, there's breathing exercise. If you want to get amped up for a competition, you can use that. But within diabetes, that's really obviously interesting to us. So you mentioned your blood sugars responded better. What do you mean by that?
So, yeah, I mean, I just think I wish I had numbers, right, for the insulin. So I was on a pump then, and I remember just consistently reducing my basal rate because it was just like, I'm getting low all the time now from these. And so the big one was sleep. I was sleeping much better. And then I'm sure we all know, when you sleep better, your insulin sensitivity's improved. And then so that's going to have downstream effects. You have more energy. Oh, now I'm walking more. I'm doing more exercise. So it's a kind of like a cascade of events, but it started with the breathing. And so my A1C went down to like the mid fives. It was like 5.4% at one point, right
Holy
after I
cow.
started all the breathing stuff, which probably sustainably wasn't safe or anything. It could be, it's good, but I don't know. I hear mixed things when I start to talk about A1C that low as a type one. But so I definitely saw the A1C. I haven't maintained a 5.4. That's why I say it, but I have not kept with that forever or
Well, and
anything.
maybe you mentioned the lows were happening often enough where that had an impact too.
Right, exactly. But it eventually, yeah, so it eventually helped me kind of not only lower some of my blood sugar, my A1C down, consistently below 7, but also manage diabetes better because I had more energy. I felt more in control. Like you said, we're always breathing, right? We're always breathing. We're doing it all the time. You start controlling it, and then you feel different. Like how, oh, yeah, I'm anxious, and now I feel calm. You start to think, well, I might have more agency in other areas of my life. Like it just gives you a little bit of like confidence and maybe understanding that, hey, I can control some of these things that I thought were uncontrollable. And I can take a little bit back, some of that peace of mind back for myself through simple breath practices. Why not apply that to other things in my life?
Yeah, well, and a question that comes to mind that I'm sure everybody else is kind of thinking in the back of their heads too, is this you being intentional with every breath throughout the day and building it into a subconscious habit? Or is it more about taking moments in the day and doing a breathing exercise for a few minutes that was most beneficial?
The latter. So
Okay.
taking a few moments each, like a period. Usually for me, it's first thing in the morning. That just works best for my schedule. Wake up and basically sit down or lie down or whatever is comfortable for people and do a breath practice.
Hmm.
And I would even say, the mindfulness of breathing, I had to start down or lie down or whatever is comfortable for people and do a breath practice.
Hmm.
And I would even say, the mindfulness of breathing, I had to start. Look, I'm an obsessive person, right? I'm sure a lot of us are here. Like you get excited about something and you go way too overboard. It's a problem I've had my whole life, and I started like paying too much attention to my breath. Like that's not healthy either, right? You need to have a balance of everything. And so mindfulness of breathing is a huge component of like understanding. For example, like when my blood sugar is getting low, sometimes the first thing I notice is that my breathing feels a little off, and I'll think, why do I feel like a little bit of breathlessness out of nowhere? And then I test, right, and I might be 70 or dropping,
Hmm.
and so it's like a signal because it's all connected to the nervous system and all these things. But yeah, so to answer the question, it was a consistent time of doing a breath practice that translated for the rest of the day into kind of like a lower set point for stress, if that makes sense. Like we kind of bring your nervous system down, bring it into balance. And then as the world hits you and things go crazy like it will for everyone, it kind of puts you at a more resilient state to handle that. You're still going to, right? Things will always go wrong. Life will always throw stuff at you, but you bounce back quicker and you can handle it a little bit better.
And that baseline of stress, I think that's a really important distinction to draw where if you're stressed out all the time, then having a stressful blood sugar might be the tipping point, right? Where it's like, oh my gosh, and you kind of lose it. So if you're
Right.
able to maintain lower stress thresholds, or maybe the other side of the equation is just improving your ability to navigate stress, but either way, you have more margin of getting stress. Is that kind of how you're explaining it?
Yeah, exactly. Like you set up your nervous system so that when the stressful event that always occurred to you before, let's say, and when it happens again, it doesn't feel as bad. The perceived stress goes down. Like it's the same stressor, but it's sort of like getting stronger in the gym, right? It's the same amount of weight, but it's easier now. So when you train your nervous system, it's those same weights, those same stressors hit you, but they don't feel as hard anymore because you just have a more resilient nervous system. Maybe you've done some mind stuff where you kind of laugh at things more often or whatever it might be, right? Where you just don't take it quite as seriously. You're like, oh, this is life. Like it's going to hit me. Um, don't let's not get out of control. So it's a thing that gradually builds up for me that I've noticed over time of building this resilience, just like going to the gym, like, where it's just physics. Like it doesn't, it sounds kind of crazy, but it's just like lifting weights. Like the more you train, the more this stuff seems to, it's the same impact, the same weights, but they don't feel as heavy, so to speak.
Yeah, well, like building capacity. Like I
Right.
imagine, well, like I did an Ironman last year, and now I look at certain events in my life, and I'm like, well, that's not that bad compared to the Ironman. I'm like,
Right,
that was
right.
freaking hard. So I think there's two sides to it. One is, like you said, training yourself to have that margin, that buffer where you can handle more, but also giving yourself perspective of like, I've handled stress in the past. I know what I'm doing. Like you said, kind of laugh at it almost, or like just a different attitude almost. But in the realm of stress, I mean, if we can even define it, what is stress? What's the effect on our physiology? Why is it so important to even consider mindfulness and breath work in the first place?
Yeah, it's that great question. And I don't know what is stress. That's an awesome question. I think, and I've read different definitions, but I think a general idea is when an event exceeds what you think you can handle, right? Because if you think you can handle it, you don't feel stressful. But if something's happening where you don't think you can handle it, or you think you maybe a lack of control, it makes you feel bad and it gives you stress. So I'll use that as my definition from a mindset perspective, I guess. But there's good stress and then there's bad stress. So there's eustress and distress. But I think what we're talking about here is the bad stuff. And on your body, it activates the stress response, the sympathetic nervous system. So our autonomic nervous system has kind of two primary branches, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And so the parasympathetic is that relaxation response. That's when you're calm, your breathing's nice and easy, your blood's flowing, your hands feel warm, and then the opposite is the sympathetic, where your heart rate's elevated, you're releasing stress hormones, and so when we go into this stress response from any event where, and this is really critical, is it's the perceived stress. So it's what we think we can't handle. So it doesn't matter what the actual event is, it's how our brains are interpreting it, and then that will release stress hormones, that will increase your heart rate, and all of this is going to have negative effects both just on our life in general, but on our blood sugars. Because like when you release cortisol, you activate the sympathetic nervous system. I think your liver starts producing glucose. Your body selectively changes insulin sensitivity. So in some places it might increase insulin sensitivity, but for the most part, it's decreasing insulin sensitivity. And so the net result is your blood sugars go up, right? That's what we see. We test our blood sugar and it's now 200 when it was 120, just because we had a thought in our head that stressed us out. And so it can, yeah, have all these downstream negative effects with just the physiological effects, starting with either our mental thinking we can't handle it, or a real physical stressor can do the same thing, which is why people doing Ironmans, right? You might end up getting high blood sugars just because it's like so physically challenging that the sympathetic nervous system is ramped up. I've done some endurance stuff in my life in the past, and it was always a challenge, like a balance between eating enough, not getting too high, not getting too low, right? It's just such a fine balance with that stress response. But I'll stop rambling and stop there.
Well, you mentioned something critical, which is perception, right? So, in many areas of life, our perception determines our reality. And so, the great example I was given many years ago was that you get stuck in traffic and you get mad until you realize that the traffic you got stuck in saved you from being under a bridge that collapsed and would have killed you, right? So it's like, oh, now I'm grateful for the same thing that I was mad about earlier, and everything changes. So your perception of stress and life's events, blood sugars, right? If I see a blood sugar of 80, am I happy or sad? Is it good or bad? It neither. It just is. Right. And so I
Right.
think that's something that I've had to learn is kind of reassessing how I assess. But with stress and even imagined events that cause us stress, there are the mindset pieces of how do I perceive this, but also the breath work. So that I think they can work hand in hand. What would you say for you has been more powerful? Is it the physical behavior of the breath work or maybe the mental benefit of the breath work or taking a moment of peace?
That's a really good question. So they go hand in hand in a way. And so I'll kind of, I guess, not give a perfectly straightforward answer. I don't know if I know which one, right? So with me, a lot of the meditation and mindfulness aspect of it came after the breath work. So I needed that physical relaxation to even allow my mind to go to those places of like calm and resilience. So the breath work is kind of the gateway. And in fact, in a lot of like ancient traditions, they start with breathing to allow them to meditate because most people can't just sit down. They might try to meditate, let's say, and then they're just like, this is annoying as hell. What am I doing here? Like, why I can't
I
control my
gotta go
thoughts.
grocery
No,
shopping.
right, yeah, and that's normal. But with breath work, it's almost like prescriptive in a way. Most people can breathe in certain patterns to elicit certain physiological responses. We're all a little different, but for the most part, there are certain principles that underlie the different breathing techniques. And so when you bring your breath down and you do slow breathing, let's say, for example, it calms your nervous system. It actually changes your brain chemistry, blood flow to your brain waves, all these cool things. And that allows you to do the mindset training in a more effective way where it actually has an impact. So today, like it, this moment right now, when you ask me the question, I would say, oh yeah, it's the mindfulness aspect of it. The thing you just said, 80 isn't good or bad. It's 80. That's what it
Right.
is. Like there's no we create this perception of what's good or what's bad. And so that has seems more powerful, but I could have never gotten there without the breath. I would have never been in a state to accept those types of things until I learned to bring my nervous system into a little bit of balance first to allow me to see these perspectives clearer.
Well, and let's talk about the nervous system for a second. So you mentioned parasympathetic versus sympathetic. What does breathing do to the body? Like physiologically, what is the big deal?
Yeah, it's got a lot of connections and they kind of make sense, right? Because breath brings oxygen in every tissue, every organ, everything, every cell relies on oxygen. Essentially, every organ in your body is somehow connected to that process of respiration in some way or another. And so when you breathe in certain patterns, it can kind of amplify or send the right signals through some of these pathways. So a big one is the vagus nerve. So there's this the primary nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system, and this I think it's about 80% of it is going from organs back to your brain. And so a big place where it innervates our body is our diaphragm. And so when we breathe nice and slow and easy and deeply into our bellies, the signals from the diaphragm being sent up to the brain are signals of calm, of peace. And so this tricks your brain. It says, "Oh, things are good," and then it sends signals back down to the rest of your body that you're okay to relax now, and this will help calm you. And this shows up. So, like, how do we know this happens? Well, it shows up with like heart rate variability is the big one, and I'm sure you all are familiar with that. And when you do these slow breathing practices, for example, it will consistently increase heart rate variability. But another way is through the brain. So we have the body impacts, and that's mainly parasympathetic driven. It signals from the stretch receptors from the diaphragm, all kind of telling your brain, I'm safe, things are good. But when you actually breathe through your nose, it contacts portions of your brain. There's the olfactory bulb, like where we smell. But it turns out that it really is just sensing airflow. It senses smells too, right? Of course, but it's the airflow itself that matters. So when air stimulates the olfactory bulb, it gives us kind of this direct line to other portions of our brain involved in memory, involved in emotional control, and things like that. And so when you breathe really nice and slow through your nose, it's sending these calming signals, and they show up in like brain waves, for example. Brain waves slow down and they become more synchronized throughout different regions of the brain. And this turns out to be a real big, like important component of how the breath work itself is going to affect how you feel and kind of like these feelings of calmness. So even if you do the slow breathing through your mouth, let's say, you'll feel okay, you'll feel calm, but doing it through the nose will amplify those significantly through the changes that are going on with the brain and the brain waves and the brain wave connectivity and things like that. So so I mean, there's other things like blood flow. There's a lot of kind of things that are going on with each breath you take, but I guess some of the key principles would be slow breathing gives you an access to the parasympathetic nervous system. So when you breathe slowly, this activates the relaxation response. And by slowly, I should say it's usually around 6 breaths per minute. There's a huge range, but let's say around
Oh.
six to give you a starting point. And the average breathing rate is like 12 to 18.
Hmm.
So you're bringing it, in half or even a third. So that will be your kind of like instant relaxation. You do that for a minute or two. Once you've trained, some people it's a little stressful the first time, but once you've kind of gotten used to that, that's a real easy way to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And then on the flip side, any type of fast breathing, like some of these yoga techniques or the Wim Hofs or these big breathing, those will activate the sympathetic nervous system. And that sounds bad, but it's in a controlled manner where
Yeah.
you are the driver's seat. And so it's almost like going to the gym. It's a little stressor, but it can actually build the resilience of your nervous system because you're pushing it into that stressful state on purpose. And then afterward, you relax just like you would after the gym or something. So those are the kind of the primary pathways, the slow versus fast, and then the nasal breathing is really key.
Love that. And you mentioned patterns of breathing a few times. So I do want to go down that route a little bit. A few examples come to mind, like double inhales and different pieces, like you mentioned, breathing faster and deeper and trying to activate sympathetic. But even looking at like free divers as an example. So there's a very dangerous practice when done unprofessionally, but for professional free divers, they'll hyperventilate intentionally right before going underwater. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it increases or kind of primes the ability of the alveoli to take on more oxygen so that the final breath fills them with a lot more oxygen they can use and dive, for minutes on end with no air. But different patterns of breath obviously have different outcomes. So what are some of the more common breathwork patterns that serve as a benefit when done intentionally?
Yeah, I would say the two biggest patterns are, well, let's say three. There's one that's like any type of slow breathing. So anything below 10 breaths per minute, but like I said, usually around like six, maybe 4 or 5, or, in that ballpark. That pattern of breathing, usually with either an equal inhalation and exhalation. So let's say 5 seconds inhaling, 5 seconds exhaling, or a slightly prolonged exhalation. So maybe 4 seconds inhaling, 6 seconds exhaling. That's one of the most common patterns you'll see across all the scientific studies for breathing practices. Is that either 5 in, 5 out, or 4 in, 6 out. And that is kind of your gateway into the calm relaxation response and maximizing heart rate variability. So
Real quick, is that the one that's labeled as box breathing or is that different?
box breathing is a little different. And
Okay.
actually that's a great segue because box breathing is another slow breathing technique, but it brings in a few breath holds. So box breathing would be like, let's say a 5 second inhale, a 5 second hold, a 5 second exhale, a 5 second hold. So you're drawing a box, 5 seconds on each side. And there are a lot of slight variations in that. So there's like the 4-7-8 breathing, there's 4-4-6-2, and all of these are just kind of like different variations of inhale, hold, exhale, hold.
Hmm.
And that has some unique benefits as well. It can cause a little bit of stress if you're new to it, but the act of holding the breath for a minute, for a few seconds, can actually it brings a really profound sense of calm because it kind of just everything stops for a second. Then you
Hmm.
just kind of things go quiet and then you exhale. The key is finding a ratio that won't stress you out, that you can handle the breath hold. So it might only be a 2 second pause at the top, and that would be enough. And
Well,
so
what
that
I
can
love
be
about that one is it distracts you too, because it gives you something to focus on. Of like, it has to be this many seconds, and there's no space to be anxious.
right,
You have
right.
to focus on it. At least for me.
That's a perfectly said. And that's a big part of what makes breath practices more effective for a lot of people than meditation is that. is that it
Uh,
gives you something to do. If you're type A, I'm type A. Like I need to
yeah,
be
for
doing
sure.
all the hell, if I'm not working, I don't know what to do with myself. And so like it's like, oh, okay, I'm not just going to sit here. I'm going to breathe and I'm going to breathe at this pattern. But it just so happens that it changes your physiology in a perfect way to support relaxation. So it gives you something to do while calming you, right? And so yeah, it's a huge component is that like mental I guess, object with the breath work.
I love that. Yeah, the times that I have attempted breath work, and admittedly I'm not consistent enough with it, but I do have to kind of visualize things to keep my mind busy. So even as like the air is filling up my limbs and then it's
Okay.
exiting me, right? Where it's like filling me with vitality or whatever it is, but just visualizing it keeps me in the moment focused on the breath. So I like that. And I kind of cut you off as far as like the most common breath pattern. So I'll let you continue down that
Oh
rabbit
yeah,
hole.
no, that this is good tangents though. Okay, yeah. So the second one would be what we were talking about, some sort of hold in between. So either a hold at the inhale or a hold after the exhale, or both, which would be the box breathing. The third would be some sort of fast breathing, and this there is again tons of variations. If you want to look to like tried and true, you would go to like pranayama, and there's lots of things like Bastrika or bellows breathing, and then there's a few other like breath of fire. And essentially, what they're doing is you're purposefully speeding up your breath, like to between, let's say, 30 and 100 breaths per minute. You're rapidly inhaling and exhaling, and that again, it's like a stressor, but in a controlled way. And so that's kind of like the benefit of it is that you ramp up your heart rate, you ramp up that sympathetic activation for just a couple minutes. It's usually not much, and then you do some slow breathing right after, and then it calms you down. Then you ramp it back up, and then you calm back down. And it's kind of like this oscillation between rest and stress back and forth. And it's again kind of what you said. It's like building a window of tolerance of nervous system, like being able to adapt to these stressors and to the relaxation in a quick way. Yeah, I mean, if someone's interested in that, I've done it here and there, and it is really nice. Like, just there's plenty of pranayama practices out there, like Bastrika. You do like some cool arm movements. So again, if you're type A and you need to be doing something, you can move your arms, and it brings you into the moment a lot more. But I guess I should add a fourth pattern that's emerged over. Actually, it's been around for a long time, but emerged in popularity is like this conscious controlled breathing or conscious connected breathing. So if you go on Instagram, if you check social media, people are, they're lying down, they have eye shades on, and they breathe for like hours, and they're hyperventilating for hours, and they see, it's spiritual, and they go into all these, like, they'll be shaking and crying, and it's really intense, right? You see these really crazy
Whoa.
videos of like advertisements of people trying to get you to go to their breathwork session. This is a whole, okay, it's definitely has its purpose. It's a validated like a technique, but it's gotten kind of, I don't know what the word is, like it's become a marketing scheme more than anything. A lot of times you just need to be very safe, do it for the right purpose, go in there with a good intention, not to like make an Instagram video, right? Like this is like really you're toying with your body's most important function. You can, the saying, like, you can go weeks without eating, days without water, but only a few minutes without air. And so like if you were to say I'm going to fast for 30 days, people would think you were nuts. Or I'm just never going to stop eating for an hour for a day straight. You think, oh, you're crazy. But when you say I'm going to sit there and hyperventilate for 2 hours, people are like, oh, cool. It's like, no, that's not safe. You have to be very deliberate with these things. And so, but the appeal, right, is that you can have very profound spiritual experiences, and it can help a lot with like addictive personalities, like addictions, and trauma, because, and again, it's a really fine line of having the right teacher, the right method. But I'll briefly explain it if people are interested. But it's like you hyperventilate for so long that it actually ends up starving your brain of oxygen, because your body's so smart. It says, oh, I'm getting way too much air. I need to turn down the amount of blood flow going to my brain, because
Whoa.
I don't eat. I mean, we've all heard of oxidative stress, right? Oxygen
Yeah.
causes issues, like it causes free radicals. And so it will slow down oxygen delivery to the brain, and it ends up kind of opening up some of these more primal regions of the brain, so to speak. Anyways, I'm going on a tangent, but it can be interesting. Just be safe and do your research before you do one of those.
No, I actually, this is a total tangent, but I just got a notification from our recording software. And it was like, confirm that you're still speaking English. We've detected some new terms. And I'm like, this is fantastic. We're going so deep
Oh,
in this rabbit hole that it's like, that's not English.
yeah. Oh man, I need to shut up. I'm sorry.
No, we love it. So, I mean, obviously, we're here with my Warriors Inner Circle. We're all type A, analytical. Tell us the details. So you're among the right company to go into these rabbit
Awesome.
holes.
Awesome.
So, looking at the different breathing techniques, there are different patterns for different purposes. And to kind of correct something I may have misled people with at the beginning, stress is not always bad. There is good stress. Working out is stress, right? So, there's certainly room for it. So, you mentioned that this breathing pattern can induce stress, the power breathing, the hyperventilating, but it's intentional and it's meant for a benefit. So, it can still be a net positive. But I've seen even books pop up and seminars and all these things like yoga for diabetes and breath work for blood sugars. So are there actually specific breathwork patterns that can help with low blood sugars or with high blood sugars? Or is it more meant to control the controllables like anxiety or frustration and not the blood sugars themselves?
Okay, yeah. Really good question. And I'm glad y'all like nerdiness because that's we'll have to go there a little bit, right? In general, I would say the second option, you're controlling the controllables, which helps with blood sugar regulation.
Hmm.
But there is evidence, right, that there are some specific principles of breathing that do reduce blood sugar spikes. For like, so example, people would take an oral glucose tolerance test and they'll monitor that blood sugar spike afterward. And they'll have groups do diaphragmatic breathing or just relaxation or just sit there in a chair, And the groups doing diaphragmatic breathing will lower that curve. Like the spike won't be quite as high. Now the area under the curve ends up being a little bit about the same, I think, but the actual glucose spike goes down some because of that parasympathetic nervous system activation, which is going to help with insulin sensitivity, which is going to help with basically the entire downstream effects of a glucose spike. So what patterns would that be? Well, it's that simple, 5 in, 5 out, 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. It's these really basic things that bring your body quickly into a state of relaxation. And by activating that parasympathetic nervous system, it can help with reducing some of the blood sugar spikes. So like if you were high and you wanted some help, again, you need to take insulin. You got to do the same. There's no magic. I'm not here to be be so like tell people I've had type 1 diabetes. I've heard all the nonsense, right? We still have to do all the normal things we'd have to do, but it would help with that bringing that sugar down maybe a little faster, perhaps if you get it at the right time, or it might help with just reducing the stress that comes along with the high blood sugar. Now, if you're low, same thing. It's kind of an interesting perspective for us as people with diabetes is that high blood sugar causes a stress response, and so does low. And low usually for me way more so. You feel like I need to do so if I'm gonna die, literally. So I need to get some food in me. So usually for that, it's harder with the breathing, because you're in a stress state. You just got to get the blood sugar up, and then the breathing will work better. But some people find it as a nice like distractor, right? They eat their glucose tablets or whatever, however they do, and then they can focus on their breath, and that will help bring down their nervous system, and it gives them something to do while they're waiting. So I would say experiment with it, but for the most part, it's the slow, easy, gentle breathing in and out through your nose that gives you the best benefits on both sides of the equation, high or low, and
Yeah,
all because of the parasympathetic
right.
response.
Well, I think that's an important piece of the puzzle is, correlation versus causation. Is the breathing exercise fixing my blood sugars? No, you still need insulin. Okay, glad we could confirm that, right? But
Right,
where it
right.
certainly can be helpful to make the insulin work better, like you said, or I've done the breathing exercises after treating a low in the past where I would like my heart's just pounding out of my chest. And I'm like, I need to chill out because if I don't calm myself, I'm going to overtreat, right? I'm going to have too much sugar. So
Right.
finding ways to balance that response internally. But also on the emotional side too, I think this is a topic that my clients might find hilarious. I've shared stories of like chucking my CGM monitor across the room when it's 250. I'm just pissed.
Right,
This
right,
sucks. I'm like, oh shoot.
right.
And in that case, my screen actually did crack. It was pretty bad. So, how do you
No.
control emotional responses, or can you control them better with breath work, or is that more just like an emotional intelligence thing and you need to grow up?
Well, I wouldn't be that harsh, right? No way. Okay, so this is a an interesting question. So in the moment, if you've been training with breathing, let's say you've been doing slow breathing every day, your body is used to that physiological response and that mental response,
Hmm.
then it can be a really good tool for the emotions. And a little quick tangent on some cool science, like there was a paper in 2002 that looked at people and basically they said, okay, imagine something that gets you really angry. Imagine something that brings you joy. Imagine something that makes you depressed or stressed. And then they recorded how they were breathing afterward. So they had all these patterns. They were like, okay, we have an angry breathing pattern. Everyone who was angry, they reported these similar characteristics.
Hmm.
Everyone that was joyful, they reported these characteristics. Everyone that was depressed, and there was like two other ones. Then they found a completely separate group just of another people who had no clue what the intention of the study was. They thought it was for cardiovascular problems. And they said, okay, breathe like this. And it was those what they found from the first study. So breathe with this inhale and this exhale or this. And then they said, well, how do you feel? This is like a secondary thing. How do you feel? Do you feel happier? Do you feel? And it turned out the breath patterns they identified from the emotions in the first study, they were able to use those prescriptively to elicit the emotions in the second study. Yeah, it was like, yeah, wow, right? Like revolutionary. Like we can
Yeah.
breathe, we have a pattern of breathing that can elicit a specific emotion, almost like, yeah, almost like therapy. Like, okay, breathe like this, you will feel happier. Breathe like this, you will feel angrier. And so in the moment, if you had the mindfulness and the awareness to be able to do that, right? That's what's tough. You have all the tool. You're a practice. You know all this stuff, right? And the minute that 250, you were like, you throw it anyways. Like we're human, so you have to be accepting of the fact that like to have the discipline to do a breath practice when your emotions are out of control is the practice. That is insane discipline. Because if you're super stressed and I say, Matt, just sit down and breathe, you're gonna be like, screw you, Nick. Why would you tell
Right.
me to do that? I'm pissed, right?
I'm
And
already
so it's
breathing.
right. I'm already breathing, and now you're telling me I should just breathe and everything will be okay. But my blood sugar is 250, or I lost a family. Like you just there's lots of levels of these stressors where the emotional response may or may not respond to breathing. It depends on the level of how stressed you are and how long you've been practicing, so that you can switch into those quickly, those states. So, but there is good news, right? I'm not trying to say, oh, it might or may not work. The key, though, is that with long-term training, you're bringing your body into a state where those stressors feel less. Like what we've talked about, these emotional roller coasters feel less severe. You have just kind of like a better perspective of it. You're like, oh, I know this is going to pass. Like just like a breath comes in and out, an emotion will come and go. It's the same exact thing. Like just like there's clouds in the sky, just like a thunderstorm happens and then it goes away. Like all these things have to happen. It's just we're not quite sure why, but things oscillate. The sun rises, it sets, right? Emotions come and go. So with a little bit of mindfulness mixed in, it kind of like helps you accept these emotional roller coasters and say, I'm a human being. Of course I should be stressed. Why would I not? My blood sugar is 250. Like it's okay that I'm upset. And instead of this is a little too philosophical, but like in the Buddhist perspective, they have the second arrow, right? Like you get shot, something bad happens to you. That's the first arrow, but it's our response of being mad about it. It's the second arrow that stresses you out. It's the second one that shoots you. And so it's like the high blood sugar is bad, but the emotional response to it is the second arrow. That's the really bad part because now you're
Oh
upset
yeah.
that I'm I'm the breathing diabetic. I'm supposed to have good blood sugars, right? And then
Yeah.
I'm mad about it because no, I'm a human and I have type 1 diabetes and these things happen, right? So it's this kind of acceptance of like things have to go wrong because that's just how life is. And sometimes we just have to like laugh at it and be like, okay, here I go again. Try our best. It's not like a just letting go of everything, but like when these inevitable things come up, the mindfulness and the meditation, these kind of mind training practices allow us to see that there's something on the other end. Like I will get through this just like I have every other time. And yeah, it sucks. And yeah, I'm annoyed. I'm 250, but if I beat myself up, my blood sugars will keep rising. And that's not the point. So why
Mhm.
would I do that when I can just accept it? What do I need to do now? Take my insulin. Done. Okay. Now I wait.
Well, it sounds like you're almost trying to create a Pavlovian response, right? Like Pavlov's dogs, where it's like if I enter a stressful situation, I start breathing intentionally. So it's not like I need to worry about that in the moment when I'm already stressed and probably not going to breathe. But if I'm doing that as a baseline daily and consistently, it becomes that triggered response where I'm just naturally ready for it or more ready. Of course, we're going to have hiccups, right? But like a muscle memory, I think maybe a better
Right.
example even.
Right. And that's yeah, it's a really good point is the habit can be really strong where, I would say I've been practicing this stuff for 8 years, probably almost every single day of my life. And when I get stressed, I notice my breathing usually. I don't
Uh,
always try to control it. It depends, it just depends on where I'm at. Like if I'm in a Zoom meeting like this, like, I work a normal job, I'm on Zoom calls all the time. And sometimes something will get me and I'll just take one breath without too many people noticing, like, and it'd be like that, even exaggerated. Like it should be a calm, nice breath, but it might even be a little exaggerated. And that always brings me back to the present moment. Like, okay, it's all right. Things are all right. And so that is like this habitual, almost Pavlovian dog, oh, something bad's happening. And I have a daughter when she was like 3-ish, she's 6 now, but I would take her to the park and that was my cue. It was like what you were saying earlier, like, do you pay attention to every breath you take? And it was like, no, that wasn't the point. It was like I would be at the park and notice I was thinking about work, right? Type A, I need to be,
mm,
and I would use the breath as like no, I'm here. One breath. Now I'm with my daughter.
yeah.
Not let me just focus on my breath instead of being with my daughter because that's just as bad, right? I need to be here for her. And so it'd be this kind of like habitual, anytime my mind's wandering around my daughter at the park, come back to be with her instead. And that's super powerful. So yes, bringing it as like a habit, as a trained response to stressors, and bringing mindfulness around the breath of like, look at my breath, it's going crazy. What's going on, Nick? Why am I stressed? Like, is there what? Because you might not even have rationalized it yet. You just notice your breath is a little erratic, and you're like, oh, it's because that person said that in that meeting, and it's it's stressing me out, and I didn't want to admit it. I thought I was all high and mighty, but nope. Here's my physiology telling me otherwise, right? So it's a really good barometer of what's going on in your life.
Well, I love that you mentioned that. This is something I've been studying recently is kind of ways we can trick our brain to take on different personas almost, where it's like triggers, totems, trained responses. So an example would be I work from home and I am two doorways away from my daughter, who is three.
Okay. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, so going into the house, I don't want to take work with me, right? So what can I do to shift into dad mode? And one of my mentor's suggestion was a hat can be as simple as that. You put a hat on to work, you take the hat off, now you're a dad. And that signals your brain of like, we're changing, and how
Right.
mindset can be carried into many things. So a single breath could be the trigger moment or a type of breath. So I know you mentioned at the beginning of this a little bit about mindset and just kind of how that flows into breath work and in and out of it. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe the golden nuggets or what do people need to know about mindset?
Yeah, good
A very big
question.
question, I know.
Right. Well,
Everything.
you're right, everything. So let's see. Two things I think I could at least mention. That'll probably turn into like 12, given how much I've been going on tangents, right? So the breath is a gateway to mindset. As I just mentioned, there's like this emotional tie, so it can actually change how you feel. So like, well, I think I've made an analogy, like, because I had to get glasses, at some point, and it was like, oh, I put on contacts. It's like that's a morning breath practice is kind of like joy contacts. Like you see things through a better perspective after you're breathing. So
Hmm.
to train your mindset, doing a morning, let's say 10 or even 5 minutes, but like let's say 10 or 20-minute practice that involves some sort of breathing or meditation or whatever we want to call it, mindfulness, it sets you up to have a better mental outlook from the beginning of the day. You have those joy glasses on, those resilience glasses on, and you feel like, okay, I can handle things that come at me. And so the breath being a component of that is a huge one. The other one, I kind of mentioned it earlier, like you can use the breath metaphorically or just use the words themselves, but like, what's the famous saying, like this too shall pass, right? You just learn that everything is gonna go. Like I'm gonna die. That's a big part of meditation, thinking about your own death, right? And thinking like, wow, I make a big deal out of all this stuff and I'm gonna die pretty soon. Like we don't have much time. And so that transitory aspect of the breath coming in and out reminds you like everything comes and goes. And so like when you're in that's like for me, that's been like the best mind training ever, is like I allow myself to be stressed if I want to, or to be emotionally upset, but also I know it's going to pass. Like it has to pass. Everything in the world passes no matter what. So it has to. And so that can be one of the most like profound mental shifts that you can make to deal with any stressor. And I'll throw a third one because this is one I really am like the biggest believer in all, is just laughing at things. Like I like to say the best breathing exercise is laughter. Like if you can laugh at things, it just makes it so much better. You just feel like, oh, why am I taking myself so seriously? Like I'm gonna die. It's all okay, not to be morbid, but like, just a perspective change. Like laugh at things, don't take yourself too seriously. And that for me, gosh, I can't tell you how many times that I do something super embarrassing. Like I'm just a nerd. I'd say stuff, you say dumb things and you're like afterward, I would normally ruminate and now I just laugh. I'm like, oh, that was stupid, but oh well. Like,
Right.
and so that's a good mindset shift too.
Recognizing the impermanence of everything. That's
Right.
powerful. I
Right.
mean, it sounds like you would maybe be a fan of, or at least interested in Stoicism, Seneca, any of those philosophers. You familiar with their work?
Yeah, of course. I'm a huge fan of ancient wisdom.
Hmm.
So I've read some of that in the past for sure. Lately I've leaned more like, and I'm not very like religious or anything. I practice all these things, but like I've leaned a lot into like the Buddhist wisdom, which is a lot of impermanence, and things like that. So yeah, I've delved into a lot of the philosophical mindsets, and I resonate with each of them a little bit, right? The Stoicism, like they have some really good practices. Buddhism, all of the ancient India, Bhagavad Gita practice, things you read in those spiritual texts. So there's a lot of different ways to, yeah, they all interrelate. And so, yeah, perfect synthesis there.
Well, I think what's nice too is like for a while I got like deep into Stoicism. I was like, this is the path. This is amazing. And I read all of Ryan Holiday's books and everything,
Right, right.
which were good. But my family reminded me that balance is important too. And they're like, the goal shouldn't be to be emotionless. Like you should be present with your family, experience the joys and the frustrations and everything. Because they saw me kind of leaning into just like a robotic nature. And I was like, okay, I can see balance. Got it. And so finding balance with stress and breath work and mindfulness, but also humanity, just like recognizing that I'm going to make mistakes and it's going to be okay. Yeah, I think it's such a powerful recognition with all of those. But within breath work specifically, again, because I know like for me, I know you mentioned actually too that you do endurance training, so I'd love to hear what that is. But for me, I've got some days where the only goal is to survive the training. Like I'm going to be out there for 10 hours, right? Other days it's only an hour, but it's very intense, and I'm trying to improve VO2 max. So with breath work, I assume that there are some specific breathing patterns, like you were talking about earlier, like equal in and out, box breathing, the intense stuff. But is there a generic place for everyone to start as well? So like someone comes to me and they're like, what should I do for exercise? I'm not going to tell them a 10-hour workout. I'm not going to tell them VO2 max intervals. I'm going to say, go lift body weight exercises, go do some squats, like just basic stuff. So what is a basic place that people can start for general benefits and well-being with breath work?
And it's so simple. It's just breathing through your nose as much like so say you're going for an endurance event or even body weight exercise. So let's tie it to body weight since that's what you would, use that as your barometer. If you can't maintain nasal breathing, take it down a notch, because nasal breathing is going to keep you in that kind of like, oh, I wish I knew the zone stuff, like zone two-ish, I think. Like,
Yeah.
it keeps you from anaerobic. Like it's keeping you in that very aerobic state. And so maintaining nasal breathing is a good way to keep your heart rate a little bit lower during training. So if you were like going for a PR, I would say do whatever you want, breathe however the hell you're going to breathe.
Right.
Just do what you got to do, right? But if you're just out there, if you're just a normal human and you are, you're not like a super athlete, you just want to like exercise and get the most of it, nasal breathing is like a really nice way to keep your heart rate a little bit under control, to maximize oxygen uptake in your lungs, to basically get all these benefits of breathing just from the nose. And if you want, you can even tape your mouth at night and breathe through your
I
nose
was
while you
just going
sleep.
to ask about
Yeah.
that.
So I do that every night. I've been doing that
Do
every night.
you?
Gosh, 7 or 8 years. It's a habit. When I put this on, right? When I put this tape on, I'm going to bed. But yeah, definitely. So nasal breathing, I would say it doesn't cost you anything, no extra time, nothing.
Mhm.
Just do it. But if you want to practice, I would say the slow breathing, the one I mentioned, either 5-5 or 4-6.
Gotcha. Well, and on the topic of rest, we can gloss over this or go deep, totally up to you. But I know I kind of surprised you with a new topic like this morning. It's like NSDR, if you want to talk about it.
Right.
So non-sleep deep rest, is that something you're familiar with in that realm?
Of course, I've heard of it, right? I've heard, I learned of yoga nidra. I think it's the same thing at some point in my life here, doing all this breathing stuff. I get put into a lot of interesting places where I learned some really cool yogic stuff too. So I know the general idea, but I don't know any of the specifics of how it works or the physiology. Like in the breathwork world or the contemplative world, let's say, like people who meditate, all those kind of holistic practices, there is a concept called just deep rest.
Mhm.
And it underlies every breath practice there is and every meditation practice. And it's this idea of like physical safety, psychological safety, and parasympathetic dominance. And so you provide someone with physical safety where their surroundings feel good, they don't feel like they're in any immediate harm to their body. Psychological safety, right? You stop ruminating, you don't feel like someone's judging you, whatever it might be. And then parasympathetic dominance, which is usually achieved through the breath, even if it's indirect. Like you might just be meditating, but the breath will slow down, which helps trigger that parasympathetic dominance. And so my guess is that those three probably are present in non-sleep deep rest. But I think you're like doing a body scan sort of, right, in non-sleep deep rest. There's
I was
some
going
other
to bring that
components,
up.
so there
Yeah,
might be a little more to it.
I mean, I've delved into it a little. Again, not an expert either, but it largely, from what I've come across, is a meditation slash body scan with kind of breath work worked into it. They don't focus heavily on breath work, but I think the idea is just to get yourself into that restful state without actually sleeping. And the goal for most people using NSDR is to kind of get a reset on their day, to get a second wind, so to speak, in 10 minutes, 20 minutes on their lunch break, let's say, or to prepare themselves for sleep if they struggle with insomnia or falling asleep in general. So, yeah, just another tool in the toolbox. But
Right.
yeah, I think it's
Right.
great. I've got a couple people in the chat, which is great. So
Oh, oh, yeah.
if you guys have questions, go ahead and toss them in as we wrap up. I'll read off some of these. We've got Keith says professional tennis players who are in a stressful point in the match often seem completely stoic, who are under tremendous stress. I wonder if they practice some of the things Nick has suggested.
There's a what's the there's the most famous tennis player right now, or one of them. He has an interview where he talks about breath work is the most important thing he does. So
Really?
yeah. Oh yeah. When you're in the breathing community, anytime someone says it on TV, it's all over Instagram. Everyone's posting it. Like, look, hey, even if they lose, like there's a clip of LeBron doing breathing on the bench, like doing his slow breathing practice, and
Uh-huh.
everyone's blowing up about it. And there was one about Federer, maybe it was Federer or Nadal, maybe one of those two, or has a really cool clip on how breath work is like the most important thing they learned. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Love that. Yeah, and for what it's worth, I mean, like a couple days ago, I went on the news to talk about type 1 diabetes, and I was stressed out on the inside, right? Trying to play it cool. Breath work, because I could feel my heart just beating through my chest, and I just focused on my breath. Heart rate started to slow, and by the time I got up there, it was better. I wasn't like totally cool, but
Right.
breath work, huge difference. And
Right.
I always have wearables on that track heart rate. I can see it, right? Where it's like 100 down to 40. Whoa, that really did work.
Right.
Deborah says, I want to work on box breathing. I always felt like I failed meditation because I couldn't sit still or shut my brain off. Box breathing will keep my brain busy for
Yes,
sure.
Deborah, that is
Yeah.
the key. And actually, that's what people say. Breath work is meditation for people who can't meditate. That's kind of like the saying. I think Belissa Vrenich coined it. She's an author and a breath coach. But yeah, if you can't meditate, try breathing, and then it might allow you to meditate if you want to. But yeah, great point.
Just a fun couple of questions to tie in towards the end. One of them is, what is the biggest myth about breath work or mindset or any of these pieces that you've talked about today that you want to clear up?
Biggest myth, I guess. Yeah, I mean, if we talk physiology, there's a lot of big myths, but I'll do a physiological one. Is that's like that big breaths oxygenate you more. It seems like, oh yeah, if you just breathe more, you would get more oxygen, but it turns out our body's beautifully designed, right? It's perfect, right? We just get in the way all the time. And when you breathe more, your body releases a lot of carbon dioxide, and that is a kind of a complex process, but essentially it makes your red blood cells hold on to oxygen more. So you're bringing in a lot of oxygen, but it can't get anywhere. It has nowhere to go. It can't be released from the red blood cells into the tissues. So you're ending up with less oxygen delivery through hyperventilation. And so
Hmm.
the key to maximizing oxygen delivery is actually slow, deep nasal breathing that kind of keeps carbon dioxide in line, whereas over breathing can actually, it's like there's like an actual formula. So for every like 1 millimeter of mercury you lose in carbon dioxide, which doesn't take much, just a few over breaths, right? It decreases blood flow to your brain by like 4%. So it's like a
Oh,
well-known physiological, yeah, relationship between carbon dioxide and brain blood flow. And then the oxygen delivery and all this. It's called the Bohr effect for anyone who wants to like Google it. It's really fascinating. So that would be the myth. Overbreathing doesn't super oxygenate you or over oxygenate you. If anything, it actually reduces oxygen delivery. So slow and steady is the way to go.
wow. Well, actually, on the topic of oxygen, what are your thoughts on like oxygen bars or hyperbaric
Right.
chambers or any of this kind of stuff?
So I don't know anything about oxygen bars. I know that with hyperbaric chambers, I think the research has been mixed, but you hear incredible stories from people, right, where it really helped them. I think there's two theories that I know of, but there could be newer ones because it's been a while since I've read it. But the the increased oxygen pressure can maybe help more oxygen dissolve into the blood itself, not the red blood cells, but like into the plasma or something. And this could help with more oxygen delivery. And there's also, yeah, it gets complicated, but there's like a fine line between like a healthy person and someone who maybe has some sort of chronic condition that prevents them from getting enough oxygen, where
Oh,
the extra oxygen will help them because it'll get them to the normal level. Whereas with like you and I at sea level, we have, if our lungs are healthy, like there's not much else we can do to get more oxygen, right? We're getting so much from the atmosphere. And a real crazy perspective shift is that like when the oxygen gets into your cells, the partial pressure of it is about 2% of what it is in the atmosphere. And so like there's a theory, right, that our whole body, our circulation, everything is actually protecting us from oxygen. It's actually making sure we only get a little bit of it because there's so much. And so yeah, so there's an argument that like, we're trying to stop ourselves from getting so much oxygen. That's why you have this huge cascade from the air to our lungs to the blood to the capillaries, all these different, so
oh
it's like
wow.
reducing oxygen each step along the way till it gets to like less of a, who knows, maybe that's all made up, but it was in a cool book called Oxygen by Nick Lane I read a long time ago. Any
Whoa.
case, so there's an argument that like our body is one massive antioxidant, just making sure we don't get enough of it. And
I was
so,
just going to bring that up. Yeah.
right, yeah, we're like a big antioxidant, right? I mean, nuts. It makes some sense, but yeah,
But yeah, I've always, it's been kind of a joke, but like oxygen is killing us. It just takes forever to do it, right? Because
right,
we're always looking for antioxidants. How do we slow
right,
that down and reverse it? So like, why are we wanting more oxygen? But it also helps because it oxygenates our blood. I don't even know which side to go on for
Right.
that, but it's kind of a funny thought. Like the
It's that middle
environment is
ground,
toxic.
right?
Yeah.
Right. It's the middle ground.
Oh man. Let me think. If there's one more question, I think the best question I can ask right now is twofold. One, what is one golden nugget you want people to know that either you want to circle back to or that we haven't covered yet? So that's the first one.
I mean, yeah, the easiest thing from this would be nasal breathing. Just make sure you're breathing through your nose as much as you can. That's like the 5% that gives you 95% of the results, right? Or it's that kind of like, yeah, the payoff is much greater for just the nasal breathing. So if you do nothing else, focusing on nasal breathing and then laugh as much as you can, right? Get that laughter in, good ab workout and good for the good for the cortisol, right?
There you go. And if you're not happy, laugh anyways. You'll
Right.
find it funny that you're not laughing on purpose. It's just the weird thing.
Right,
Puts
right.
you in a good mood. Now, second piece that I want to make sure we lay out, where can people find you? What are you up to? I know you mentioned social media. You've got an app. You've got a website. So tell us where we can find more about your stuff.
Okay, cool. I am the breathing diabetic on Instagram. That's where I mainly am. I think I'm on all of them, but that's the only place I ever check. And then I have we have an app. I teamed up with the breathing app. So we have the breathing app for diabetes, which is a 28-day program where I guide you through science. And then my good friend Eddie Stern guides you through breathing exercises. And it's a really cool app for specifically for people with diabetes. So we have each day you get like a little 2-minute science lesson on how the breath affects things related for diabetes specific. And then you get a practice. So it's a fun way to get introduced to this stuff and build a habit. And then I guess if you're really interested in stuff, actually tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern, so I guess that would be 8 a.m. your time.
Yeah.
I'm doing a workshop called Breathing for Better Brain Health that is basically going into a lot of stuff, some of the stuff we talked about today, but focusing completely on the breath through like the nasal pathway, the metabolic pathway, through the speed pathway, and then through like things like interoception of the breath and how it affects your brain chemistry, brain waves, and all that stuff. So if you're interested, you can check that out. You can just go, gosh, actually, it would be at breathlearning.com/brain. I feel like I'm, plugging here. I feel like
Oh,
a
plug
marketing
away.
person. Yeah, but breathlearning.com/brain is the way to get there. Actually, or on my Instagram, I think in my profile, I have a link there too. So
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to head over there right now.
awesome.
That sounds
Yeah.
really
I think
intriguing.
I think we're on Instagram together, right? I think I follow you.
We are,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely, right? Yeah. Geo got me onto you a while ago.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, it's fun connecting with other type ones in different specialties as well, because I mean, one of my thoughts is that blood sugars really do impact all and are impacted by all. Like it's all connected, right? And so breathing is something we do every day, all day anyways. Why not
Right.
optimize it and do so intentionally? So, I mean, as people are already flooding in the chat, like this has been incredible. We're so grateful that you had some time to come hang out with us today and open our mind to the importance behind this. And I mean, I've only inched my way into it, and I can tell you, I've already seen benefits of this. It's everything you say is absolutely true. So, Nick, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. It's amazing.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you all for joining and appreciate you having me on, Matt.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. Well, have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you guys next time.